Tonight on the Your Life Matters Show podcast.
As a therapist, if I'm experiencing, just I'm physically exhausted and I'm experiencing empathy fatigue and, I'm irritable and all that, obviously that is going to have a huge effect on my work, but also on my personal life, where I could find myself, basically taking that out on somebody else or, being less willing to talk about things at home or, any number of things.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you made the choice to watch our show this evening and joining us for another episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast with your hosts Steve Hodgson and Dr. Eric L. Davis.
Tonight's episode is titled, Quiet Burnout, When You Look Fine But Feel Empty Inside. You can be productive, successful, and still be completely burned out. More people than ever are showing up to work, relationships, and daily life looking fine on the outside, while quietly feeling exhausted, disconnected, and emotionally empty on the inside. This is what many are calling quietly burned out. Recent surveys show that about 55% of U.S. employees report experiencing burnout in some form. Other data indicates 66% of U.S. employees feel burnout to some degree. Some surveys report burnout is affecting up to 8 in 10 workers at least sometimes. Roughly 77% of Americans say work stresses them out. About 57% report burnout from work-related stress. Burnout doesn't always look like breakdowns or missed days. It looks like pushing through, masking fatigue, and telling yourself, I just need to get through one more day. Burnout doesn't just manifest at work, it bleeds into relationships, social connections, self-esteem, and identity. On tonight's episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast, Dr. Eric L. Davis and Steve Hodgson will be talking about burnout and mental health, how it shows up at work, how it affects relationships, and how modern culture, media, even technology may be the fuel. If you've ever felt drained but didn't think it was bad enough to ask for help, this conversation is for you. Remember that burnout isn't weakness, and that your life truly does matter.
Well, howdy, and welcome to the Your Life Matters Show podcast. I'm your host, Steve Hodgson, and of course, I'm joined by my co-host, who gently told me that ignoring my problems is not a long-term strategy. Licensed psychotherapist, Dr. Eric L. Davis. Dr. Davis, I'd like to start with a little humor.
Yeah.
Where we start here. We're in a little strange period in time with society.
Yep.
Things are going on post-COVID and everything else. And I see it myself. I see a lot, not in myself, but is in with myself with social media, which we'll talk about later, with a really good topic called burnt out.
Uh-huh.
Mean, really, we're burning out, all over the place.
Absolutely.
Now, as today is as interesting as this topic is to discuss, we want you to know, everyone here at the show, that the words Your Life Matters, that isn't just a podcast name, okay? But it's a heartfelt belief about each and every one of you. Now, I joked about ignoring problems before, but in real life, it's not a strategy that makes any kind of sense to anybody. It's just an avenue for destruction, is really all it is. It's for your mind, your body, and the life you've created around you. You just don't want to destroy all of that. So please listen closely to the message from our sponsor, Waypost Counseling.
There are moments in life when you look around and think, how did I get here? The stress, the heartbreak, the habits you never meant to build, sometimes it all piles up until you don't even know where to start. But you don't have to find your way alone. At Waypost Counseling, you'll find people who genuinely listen. People who walk with you, not ahead of you. Founded by Dr. Eric L. Davis and therapist Erin Davis, Waypost was created for anyone who needs a safe place to breathe again. They offer support for individuals, couples, addiction, and those painful life transitions that shake your foundation. And now, with Jeff Gassior, a problem gambling peer support specialist, clients can connect with someone who's been there. Someone who understands the fight and the hope that comes after it. And maybe the hardest part isn't admitting you need help, it's figuring out how to start. That's why Waypost makes counselling accessible from anywhere. Whether you're sitting at your kitchen table, on your couch after a long day, or in a quiet corner where you finally feel safe, you can meet with a therapist face-to-face through secure online sessions. You don't have to fight traffic, rearrange your entire schedule, or force yourself into a waiting room when you're already overwhelmed. Help can meet you right where you are. There's something powerful about being able to speak your truth from the comfort of your own space. With Waypost's online counselling, distance is never a barrier. Whether you live across Indiana or on the other side of the country, you can connect with Dr. Davis, Erin, or Jeff in a private, compassionate, judgment-free environment. For many people, that first step feels less intimidating when it happens at home, and sometimes that makes all the difference. If you're tired, if you're hurting, if you're ready for change, reach out. Visit waypostcounseling.com or call 317-762-0904 or 317-659-0179. Waypost Counseling. When life feels heavy, let someone help you carry it. Make the call today.
Well, today we live in a world that rewards productivity, even when it costs us our peace. More and more people are showing up every day doing exactly what's expected to them. We meet deadlines, answer phones, messages, check the email, check the boxes. Silently, they carry exhaustion, emotional fatigue, and burnout just below the surface. Now, this kind of burnout doesn't always look dramatic. And we're not talking about a car tires, burning out on the road. It's not just the kind that shows up calling off work or completely shutting down, but it's that quiet kind. The kind where you still show up every day. You still perform the best that you can, but if you pay attention, that gets less and less. And you can still smile, but it's only on the outside, not on the inside. In reality, on the inside, you're exhausted. We see more and more people pushing through emotional fatigue at work, in relationships, even in society, presenting as fine while privately inside collapsing. And that kind of burnout can be incredibly hard to recognize, both by others and also by ourselves. So today's episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast, as we said in the film, is titled Quiet Burnout, when you look fine but feel empty inside. Now, Dr. Davis and I will be talking about burnout, your mental health, and not just in the workplace, but remember, burnout affects your relationships, your social lives, and the way modern culture and media influence how we cope. Now, we're going to explore how more people are turning to technology and AI for support. We just talked about this before we started. Sometimes as a helpful tool, sometimes it's a sign they're simply too exhausted to keep going the way they've been going. So tonight, we're going to try to answer 5 questions. Okay, what does burnout really look like? Why are people masking emotional exhaustion so well? How does burnout affect relationships and connection? How are media, culture, and technology influencing burnout? And what can people do before burnout becomes a crisis? So if you've ever felt drained, disconnected, or overwhelmed, not with this podcast, but even while appearing okay, this conversation is for you. So let's talk about burnout, what it means to our mental health before the quiet becomes a crisis. Okay, so Dr. Davis, when people hear the word burnout, they often think of someone who's completely overwhelmed or shut down, someone that's hiding and quivering in a corner someplace. Now, clinically speaking, what does burnout really look like today, especially in this quiet, more hidden version we see?
I think the biggest indicator is just irritability, where basically So in my line of work, what we're taught in school is, in addition to just feeling physically exhausted, that something that we encounter when we're burning out is called empathy fatigue. So when my ability to be empathetic, um, when I'm struggling with that, that really is like the big warning sign for a therapist. Um, but I think that that is applicable to anybody. There, when things that I used to enjoy become a task, or when I'm irritated about everything, I think that's the biggest indicator nowadays of burnout.
Yeah. Um, you know, why is it that, is it just like, so people don't know what we're really feeling, that we, where we smile, like I said earlier, we smile and we're fine on the outside,
Mhm.
but then we're exhausted and emotionally depleted. I mean, what's making us feel that way?
I think it's our culture, honestly. America, and it's not a bad. I don't mean this in a bad way, but our culture is one of get it done. You pay. You like everybody participates in the grind, and you just have to work harder. And friends that I have that are from other countries, a lot of times have pointed out that, it's like everybody's in a hurry here. And what do you mean? And for I have a friend in Spain, and he talked about, they take a siesta during the day, and everybody rests. So we really have not integrated rest into our average workday. In fact, we've kind of made rest the enemy, you know.
So I remember in the 80s and probably the 90s, a big thing came about working 5 days a week and having 2 days off.
Yeah,
And everybody was saying, why can't we have work 4 days and have three off?
yeah,
Because that was something they were doing in Europe. And so, and really, I used to say the same thing. It's like, or even, if I show up, I'm going to work an 8 hour day. 2 more hours isn't going to make a big deal
yeah,
out of it.
yeah,
I'm already here. I've already traveled here. It's not
yeah,
like I got to travel here all over again. I'm already here. I'll work 2 more hours and then have 3 days off instead of two.
yeah,
Um, you're right. And remember, I grew up in New York, the city that never sleeps, as they say, where everybody's in a rush, everybody's in their own mind frame, because you're right, everybody's been taught, you know, you got
mhm,
to keep working, you got to keep working, you got to do this,
yeah.
you have
You
to
you
accomplish
can't
that.
be a constant complainer. You can't, don't be negative. Like, and I mean, all those things are valid, but one of the most important parts of our ability to do a good job is our ability to rest when we really need to.
Hmm.
I mean, I always got so tired in school of hearing self-care, self-care, self-care. But I mean, there's a reason that they are constantly talking about self-care, and it's because, especially when you do work that's emotionally exhausted, physically exhaustive, etc. I mean, it can have a profound effect on just your mental well-being.
I look at people that, even myself, that work 70, 80 hours a week, and I have a close friend of mine right now who, in the middle, he's on the East Coast there, and had the snow that they've been hit with and everything else. And Sunday night, I had to get up during the night to travel to, I think it was to Maine and stuff for work.
Uh-huh.
And, his like 2 or 3 hour flight from Ohio took him like 12 hours to get there,
Yeah.
with delays and everything else. So, and then he couldn't get the regular transportation, and the hotel, which was like in 40 minutes away, took him 2.5 hours to drive
Wow.
to. So yeah, we're taught to just keep going, but that burnout's going to catch up to us.
Yeah.
So what are some of those early psychological or even emotional warning signs of burnout that people often miss?
So just feeling off, like we know how we feel, we know how we typically feel. And if we're, like everybody has a bad day now and then. But
Hmm.
if you start noticing that, like for me, my empathy can run low at times, but if I'm starting to see where it's like I'm lacking empathy, several days in a row, that's a pretty good indicator that I need to stop and take a look at what I'm doing because I'm not caring for myself like I should be. Um, so I think that um, irritability with things, just feeling completely overwhelmed. That's the other thing with burnout is we'll take on so much and we're trying to do a good job and all that, and we don't want to disappoint anybody. But, that's like we call that people pleasing in therapy. It's, sometimes the most important part of my life is the things I say no to, so I could go on and on, but
When
I'll
you were
shut up
saying
with
that,
that.
all I kept thinking was the phrase "stop and smell the roses."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
It's
that's
it's
really what
really
it's all
important
about.
that we do that. I mean,
Hmm.
really.
I used to love going away. On vacation. People say, "What? Why are you going on vacation?" Because if when you're working 70, 80 hours a week,
Yeah.
sometimes you just need to walk away for a week.
Another thing during COVID, I remember, I just think this just popped into my head, but I was in a board meeting right after COVID happened. So it was probably 2 weeks into COVID and everybody's still sheltering in place at home, all that. And I remember I was in a board meeting. We were doing it online, and one of the board members said something that it really resonated with me. I remember all he said was, he goes, "Yeah, I'm having a really difficult time, trying to figure out if I'm working from home or living at work." And I mean, for me, it was, wow, okay, yeah, that was a great way of describing it, because it's, like there's moderation of anything, including work, is important.
Yeah.
And if anybody's like me, being a therapist, I love working. I work for fun. I mean, really, like, I enjoy it. It's not just a job for me, but too much of a good thing can be a problem, you
See,
know.
I worked from home for a number of years with Street Smart, and
Mhm.
you lose that separation, like he
You
said.
do.
Am I home or am I at work?
Yeah.
Because, like I always said, if I was sitting down watching TV at 8 o'clock at night in the living room and I'd suddenly hear the phone ring in
Yeah.
the office room there, it's like, now I'm not home anymore. My ear is at work,
Yeah.
and it's like, should I go and listen to that in case it's important? Someone calling about something. And then you go
Yeah.
in, it's like some telemarketer or something like that. But, it just took you out of that relaxation
Yeah.
time. So I want to break down some things if we can.
Okay.
Separate things out. So let's start with like burnout in the workplace, which we've been basically
Mhm.
talking about here. We see people going to work each and every day. Some work in factories where they assemble or they make products. Even though they move to different positions every other week, eventually they're right back where they started again in the cycle.
Yeah.
All I can say is God bless them. I saw an assembly plant in Westport, Indiana. There
Mhm.
used to be there was the 5K Corporation, and they were a client of mine for a website. And sometimes when I go to see Ken, who was the president there, he'd be on the phone, so I would have to wait outside his office,
Mhm.
to give him privacy. And I'd
Right.
look out on the floor where these people were working, and they were taking these little small parts and putting them into a thing.
Yeah.
Taking those small parts, putting them into things. So I'd be out there 10, 15 minutes while he was on the phone. They said, Steve, okay, sorry, come on in. And I go in and I sit down. I was like, Ken, before we start, he's like, well, I can never do that. And he goes, what? I said, what they're doing out there.
Yeah.
And he looked me straight in the eye and said, well, I couldn't do it either.
Yeah.
So I can see that wearing people out. Does repetition of work contribute to burnout?
It can, I mean, it really can. Obviously, with someone who's an expert in something, obviously there's been repetition there. They've dealt with that sort of topic or that sort of issue numerous times. So I mean, obviously that, repetition can be an important thing, but also if it's just the same thing over and over and over, um, that can contribute to burnout for sure.
And I think that's why companies like Honda, I know at least
Yeah.
they rotate where people work. because this way you're not going to work. Oh my God, I'm going back and doing this again today. Putting handles on car doors. You know,
Hmm.
this way at least it keeps them motivated to it's something new to them.
Yeah.
We talked about this, you and I, before we even started to record here today, about technology, AI, and people that feel overwhelmed at work are turning to AI now for tools.
Mhm.
Now, from a mental health perspective, when can that be helpful, and when can that be a sign of even deeper burnout?
If I find so, if I'm simply sitting in an echo chamber with me and AI, that means there's only one set of human thinking that's going into the conversation, so to speak. So, I think that it's important when we're burned out. One, it's important to first of all take a step back, but it's also important to gain. And you were talking about that, like people say, "Why are you going on?" Because I want to get a different perspective for a little bit,
Mhm.
and that's being in that echo chamber in our head 24/7. That can add to burnout also, um, because it's important that we talk about what's going on with us, about how we feel. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question anywhere
Well,
in
it
there.
is,
I'm so sorry.
in a lot of ways, I see going to AI for that different perspective. Okay,
Yeah.
even if, I've done it myself, I have restrictive lung disease.
Mhm.
Okay, I give my doctor 1000% credit. If he told me to walk on my big toe, I'd figure out how to walk on my big toe for a week.
Yeah.
Okay, but I also have gone, when he tells me, this is basically all we can do. I'm just out of curiosity, just, to play
Yeah.
around, not for medical reasons, but to play around and say, is that all I can do? Or is there something else?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you're talking about the thoughts echoing in your own head, it's about bouncing off. Yeah. Okay. If you want answers, to some of that stuff, but you can't rely on AI to do it
Mhm.
all for you.
Yeah.
And you know, I use AI. We've talked about, for the show, sometimes
Mhm.
develop a
Yeah.
presentation, write up a program, and now you can feed it to AI all the info you want and get it done in under an hour.
Mhm.
Okay, and you and I know when we actually had to do that stuff, using Microsoft you know, all these presentations and stuff
Yeah.
took us hours.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, right. PowerPoint. Thank you. It would begin with a P. Okay. And we'd spend hours and hours and hours doing that. And, even with, I'm a web designer by trade. That's what I did for some years.
Yeah.
But even like AI helped give me ideas for the website or new design of the
Yeah.
website. So I see people turning to that, but it doesn't mean that I stop thinking.
Yeah.
I use it to enhance what I got, not to do it for me.
Yeah.
But have we not become like a robot ourselves and turned to AI, Jared means great master,
Yeah.
what what should we do next? I mean, have we gotten to that point? I'll just before you answer that, I've gotten to the point where I'm fed up with websites that are using AI chatbots
Mhm.
if you have a problem.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are basic chatbots that can't think. So
Mhm.
if you say I'm looking for A, B, and C, and it tells you to go to this page, you say, but I've gone to this page
Yeah.
already, and it doesn't answer A, B, and C. Well, you got to go to this page, and it's there. It's like, are you listening to me? It's not
Yeah.
listening to you after a while. So what's happening? Can the simplicity of using AI assist in people burning out?
Yes and no. So it depends on how you use it. Like if everything I think and do has to go through, AI, then I mean, that's not living. So
Well, it's
I
also
would
not
say,
thinking either.
yeah. So I mean, I think that would absolutely lend to burnout. But
Hmm.
I do think that when it comes to like tedious things or simple things that, like compile a list of whatever, those are things that AI can definitely help carry the load. Um, but I wouldn't look to AI as having all the answers to life and all that stuff. That's just my opinion.
And we've talked about this, like with AI, it just saves me time from looking up stats that you see folks in these opening
Yeah.
films for the episodes. It's a it just, it can search thousands of files in 10 seconds, whereas it's going to take me 3 or 4 hours to go through all of that.
Yeah.
But, you have to use your own brain. So is there a risk that people start outsourcing not just their task, but thinking in their emotional energy just simply because they're too exhausted?
Yeah, I do think so. I think that, um, it's possible to just basically kind of enter a state of like, we've heard about AI psychosis and all these different things, but it really is, it's possible to kind of enter a trapped state, an unmoving state, I guess, where it's just, you know, where a person may think, I can't do anything without AI, and it's like, we did everything without AI just a few years back, you know. Um, so I think it's important that we don't lose sight of who we are, what's important to us, what we do, etc.
And think about, that's why people don't go to libraries anymore.
Yeah.
It's like they got the computer. They can look the stuff up on the
Hmm.
computer. Well, then the computer's going, now what are we supposed to do? Go to the library.
Yeah.
Because that's how we did it for years and on there. So let's move beyond the workplace because burnout can happen anywhere. Okay. And a lot of times, too, if you're burnt out in the workplace, that's going to carry forward into your personal life. So,
Mhm.
we frame burnout as a work issue. But we see clients whose burnout shows up in their relationships and also in their social lives. Now, how does burnout tend to spill over into those other areas?
So for example, as a therapist, if I'm experiencing, just I'm physically exhausted and I'm experiencing empathy fatigue and, I'm irritable and all that, obviously that is going to have a huge effect on my work, but also on my personal life, where I could find myself, you know, basically taking that out on somebody else or, um, being less willing to talk about things at home or, any number of things. But when we're not carrying it, like the problem is if I'm burned out at work, that burnout doesn't know that it's only related to work.
Right.
So I'm going to experience it, even if it's a result of work, I'm going to experience it everywhere.
And we carry it out into our personal lives, as you said, at home with your spouse, with your children,
Yeah.
even with your friends.
Yeah.
That it starts to show the difference. So, what impact does like a long-term burnout have on things like emotional connection, patience, even communication when we're talking about relationships?
I mean, it can have bad effects in tons of areas of life where, people can develop ulcers from worrying, or people will basically, like worry themselves sick or work themselves into the ground, so to speak. I mean, um, burnout's a very real thing. And, the problem is to prevent burnout takes balance. But like we were talking about earlier, our culture is kind of, I think we're maybe getting a little better with time, but it's like, our culture is one that, we'll rest when we're dead. We'll rest when we're done. You just have to pull up your bootstraps and try harder and just work through it, and that's not always the solution. Sometimes the solution is I'm doing way too much. And one of my mentors that I studied under, um, when I was in school, something that he always said, he would say that depression is the result of a person dealing with too much for too long. And I really think he was, not that depression and burnout are exactly the same thing, but they basically, obviously go hand in hand. And that's what he always said. that when a person is dealing with too much for too long, the result is feeling depressed or feeling completely burned out.
How frequent is that those two are confused? That someone just saying to themselves, "Oh, I'm dealing with depression," but really they're just dealing with burnout.
I think a lot of times these days, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
where, it'll be, I'm just so depressed. But, and then when you start talking to somebody, it's, well, I've been working, 13-hour days for the last 3 weeks, or whatever. And it's kind of like, well, so some of this may be what we call situational depression, versus clinical, where, the solution to that is to solve the burnout.
Now we'll talk about the culture of constant availability. And we're not talking
Uh-huh.
about AI here. We're talking about like social media, notifications, performance, pressure, all that stuff. Why does that contribute to burnout even outside of work?
Because there's no way to shut things off. Like if I work from home, if all the work I do is working from home, I do work on my phone, I do it on my laptop, iPad, whatever. Like there has to be some separation there.
Mhm.
Otherwise, like my friend on the board said, it's like I can't tell if I'm working from home or if I'm living at work. And I'm definitely the type of person, because I do love what I do, that it I will find if I'm not careful, I'll work, I will not stop working, you know um until I just am physically exhausted. And it's hard for me to maintain that balance, obviously, especially when you're emotionally connected to the work you do. They always say you got to leave work at work, when you go home. And it's, I wish I could, I sure wish I could, but that's just impossible. But anything we can do to create some separation, or to mix things up a little bit to keep them interesting for ourselves, um, is a good thing, I think.
See, I always used to remember when a lot of my clients for Street Smart Web Design were also personal friends.
Hmm.
And I sort of had this, it was an unwritten rule that, when we were at a barbecue, if I was doing a barbecue and we're all sitting around BSing, no work.
Hmm.
It's so easy to say, oh, by the way, before I forget, we'll forget because this isn't the place for it.
Yeah.
It's like the joke you see all the time. I finally got the courage to talk to my doctor about my hemorrhoids. Of course, he just ignored me and kept walking to the supermarket and continued his shopping. It's you can't just it's
Yeah.
like when I ran into my vet and stuff. I didn't sit there and talk to him about the dog when I
Yeah.
was out there. I would talk to him about we used to work out, in the same gym and stuff. That
Hmm.
type of conversations.
Yeah.
And sadly, the overload of information, violence, rhetoric, politics has turned social media into a nightmare. Now, we can do an entire show on this. And actually, I think we did do a show very, very early on this too. Um, but, even for me, you're no longer allowed to express your opinion anymore on social media. It's almost like you have to have their opinion or they don't want to hear anything to do with you. And if you present something different, there's no answer. They just attack you personally.
Yeah.
Now, a few weeks ago, we had on Mike Bartlett, okay, as the person that we were looking at there,
Hmm.
okay. And I happened to see a post yesterday. He said, and this is interesting. He said, if you disagree with me, that's your right. But please don't get on here telling me how wrong I am, cursing me, or even telling how much you hate me. You're free to your opinion as I am to mine.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know recently myself, I still baited. Okay, I'll admit it. Okay, we do these shows on and say, don't
Hmm.
get involved in I'm still, you know what?
Hmm.
I get on there and I'm tired of reading stupidity,
Hmm.
and I hear your side, but you're not even listening to the opposite side of that.
Yeah.
And I'm personally tired of a lot of the whining on both sides.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I've lost relatives that took themselves off social media for which is fine. Okay. But I almost think that some people go on social media just to listen to other people who support their views.
Mhm.
They go on there just so I'm thinking A, B, and C, and I go on there and there's Jeff, Jane, and Bill, and they all say the same thing. So, hey,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, I must be
Yep.
right, type of situation. My brother, even yesterday, which is even on this, had put up a post about what's going on in Minnesota. And my aunt, who's very, different viewed, and even my cousin, who's very second cousin, different views, okay, went after him.
Hmm.
And he was you're not listening to the actual point. You're
Hmm.
trying to divert by putting another point, type of
Yeah.
thing. And they got into almost a heated argument. And I read this while I was eating dinner at like 10 o'clock last night.
Yeah.
And, I sent them a text. I was like, did you really think you were going to change their opinion? Okay. And he says, no, but, it's aggravating. And I'm like,
Yeah.
bingo. Okay. And it's
Hmm.
almost got to the point where, all truthfulness, my wife used to say you spend too much time on Facebook. Well, you're right. You know what? I'd rather sit and play
Hmm.
video solitaire
Yeah.
now these days than deal with social media. I used to
I
go
mean, it's
on.
like a friend of mine he called it rising above the static.
Yeah,
And
but it's
basically,
hard to
like, I
do.
love that way of saying that. Like, there's so much static in our daily life. There's social media, there's the news, there's just everything going on. And sometimes, like, if I don't disconnect from that, like on a semi-regular basis at
Hmm.
least, I mean, that is where a lot of the burnout can come from, just because it's just a constant overload of information. That's what he always talked about. He would say, it's important that we kind of center ourselves and, think about what's going on, and really just kind of process all of the information that we've gathered, over the day or the last few days or whatever, and just kind of rise above that static. Get out of that static for a minute, kind of let the dust settle. And I think of it that way. I mean,
Well, you
I
see,
think that
people are
that's really
too
important.
influenced by media.
Yeah.
Okay, media has an agenda, and it's a paid agenda, and 90% of it, and it's both sides, both ends of the media go to different extremes,
Yeah.
but it's a point where people say, "Oh, you must watch this station or CNN, or you watch Fox."
Mhm.
No, you know what? I don't watch any news books. I just not, because you're not hearing what's really going on,
Yeah.
and you're hearing the topic they want to focus on, and I think that's a problem with people today. So, with all of that, what I just started talking about, is that a big contributor to burnout today?
I think so. Yeah. I think that, when it's just being pummeled with information, and after a while, you would, I think we reach a saturation point, and that's really, I think of burnout in that way. Like, there's an example I use in group. I used to call it the anger bucket, but basically saying that, if we are a bucket, that, basically, if stress was water and I'm a bucket, you know, there I'm going to have to be able to deal with some water. But if my capacity for stress, like, think of that bucket filled to the very top, you know, then if you just pour a little bit of water, it's going to spill over. And that's kind of a good indicator of burnout a lot of times, where things that usually would just kind of roll off, no problem, easy peasy, like, oh, it's a hill I'm going to die on. Like, those are good indicators. So disconnecting from that constant flow of opinions and information and just data or drama or whatever, all the stuff is crucial.
If anything, I've learned one thing about all of that. You're not going to change anybody's mind. I think
Yeah.
we said this back in the thing about how to handle holiday stuff. You're not going
Mhm.
to change my mind. I'm not going to change your mind on what you're doing. I try
Not
just
not instantly,
no,
probably not instantly,
but you know what? I don't think it it has, even when it comes out that they're wrong
Mhm.
on what they've been, the narrative. All they do is to get quiet and then deflect, as my brother was using the word. You're just deflecting from what it is because you don't want to say, "Hey, I'm wrong," you
Right.
know. And I'm not going to go into specifics, but the other day I even said, "Hey, I was wrong about this,"
Hmm.
as more and more facts start to come out. But I'm not changing my opinion on this.
Yeah.
Okay, and because I don't want to go into to specific topics on it, but but it gets to the point where you really need to step back from it.
Yeah.
See, I'm watching. There's much more important things going on in the world,
Hmm.
except what's going on in Minnesota right
Yeah.
now. Well, what happened to the biggest what scam in American history financially that was supposed to be going on there with federal funds being scammed. We don't
Hmm.
even talk about that anymore.
Yeah.
We're talking about ICE. And wasn't that the purpose of all of it?
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. But yeah, okay. So do you see people comparing themselves to unrealistic standards online and internalizing that pressure in a way that fuels burnout or emotional fatigue? And before you answer that, what what really spurred me on with that question is I think it was this morning where they released during the night in Minnesota there were people that I guess attacked some hotel and
Uh-huh.
started doing destruction in the
I
hotel.
hadn't even heard about that
Yeah,
yet.
yeah. And with folks, we're recording this on January 28th. So in case you're wondering, hey, we're in the middle of February. What are they talking about? But the papers were showing the people that were arrested that were doing the destruction, not protesting.
Hmm.
Okay, but it got to the point when they started doing damage that now they had to start arresting people. And of the 10 people or something they showed, there was like three or four that made me question, huh?
Hmm.
You know what? Here's a 22-year-old girl who's, college educated and stuff like that, and she's out causing destruction in some place because they thought that there were ICE agents staying there and there weren't. Okay, and so
Yeah.
they start what there's unrealistic standards and pressures that people are feeling because they've gotten to the point where we need to go out and do something.
Yeah. I think that so part of the issue that we run into is I call it judging my insides by everybody else's outsides.
Hmm.
Where, if I go on social media, if I'm listening to the news, whatever, like when I am getting information, if I take everything at face value, which unfortunately in today's world we can't always do that,
Can't take anything
regardless
at face
of where
value.
somebody stands politically or any of that, all that aside, like, we can't always take what we hear at face value. So honestly, like I've really myself, I've stepped back from social media a ton as compared to, my social media presence, years back. Um, just because really for that reason, because it's, I appreciate everybody's right to have opinions and who am I to tell them what to think? But at the same time, it's kind of like, was said where it's like, well, I'm allowed to have my opinions. And, and I always think that too, like, you know what? I don't even have to argue. I'm allowed to take a break,
Yeah.
where it's like, so I don't know if that's helpful, but we definitely can run into problems when the expectation is that, um, we're going to reach this standard, whatever that is. What's most important is that standard realistic? Like if my standard is I'm going to go to the gym tonight and tomorrow we're going to have a live stream and I'm going to lift 5,000 pounds, that's unrealistic.
Right.
I am going to be disappointed tomorrow. There's no way. But if it's, hey, something else, like that's realistic. So I was just talking this morning in a group I was doing about SMART goals, about setting goals that are realistic, attainable, um, etc. I mean, just and the same could be said with expectations. We need to set smart expectations of ourselves and others. I'll just leave it at that.
I looked at the influence. I think we talked about this in the last episode about the influences
Hmm.
that are out there that, everybody wants to be this big influence. That there was somebody, some YouTube influencer had sold its business and everything for almost like $900 million.
Wow.
I saw it in the paper the other day, reading through some site. So everybody wants to, take this easy way out. I don't need to go to work and
Hmm.
stuff like that. I can do this. And I keep thinking of the influencer who, there was a woman who was going to all these fancy restaurants and everything else.
Hmm.
But what she did was she was cutting out on the checks and stuff
Ah.
because she wanted to be that big influencer. So, get thousands of views, people would be watching her and she get paid for that. And, that's very unrealistic standards that people are
Hmm.
setting up now. It's almost to the point where we're worried about AI and stuff, but we're actually paving the way for it because everybody just wants the quick buck.
Yeah.
Now they know people don't want to do the work anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all of them. We did
Sure.
that Gen Z interview. They want to do it. There are a lot of people that do, but even the Gen Zers are seeing people that are looking around them at their own peers and saying, what's going on here?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
TikTok, and now people don't want to be part of TikTok anymore. That's the newest thing I've been reading about. I
Yeah.
no clue why, but we don't put our stuff on TikTok, so okay, it's one less thing I got to worry about. But you know what time it is in the show?
It's the lightning round.
Yes,
I,
it's the lightning round. Okay, Dr. Davis, it's on you today, okay?
okay.
We're going to switch gears for a quick lightning round. Short answers, first thing comes to your mind and stuff. Okay, here we go. Number one, burnout or stress. What's the key difference?
Burnout is, like chronic, stress is temporary.
Okay. One emotion you might often see hiding underneath burnout.
Irritability.
Okay. True or false? You can be burned out even if you still love your job.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally
Okay.
true.
What's one common myth about burnout you wish people would stop believing?
Basically that, that if they're feeling burned out, if they're feeling overwhelmed, that it's them doing something wrong, or that it's them not being good enough. Or, I mean, that, you can, when we're passionate about what we do, sometimes that, like we can use that even to our own detriment,
Mhm.
where it's everything's about balance.
It's like man up or you pull your panties up, and just do the work. Okay. Number five, what's an early warning sign of burnout most people ignore?
Probably, honestly, something I see a lot with clients, headaches, like not migraines, but just headaches, just.
Number six, what does rest alone fix burnout? Yes or no?
Just, so rest alone, not necessarily, because if it's not quality rest, or if it's not, I think for me, when I gauge self-care, basically, it's like, how do I know if self-care is working or not? If it's working, I will notice some, or begin to notice at least the beginnings of some changes in my perspective. That's what I always look for.
Well,
Where
you
if
have to
I'm
really
feeling,
know the reason for the burnout too, because you can
yeah,
take a break for it, but then you're going to come step right back in the same situation again,
right,
and you're just going to burn out real quick all over
exactly,
again. So yeah, but my answer to that would have been no too. So one boundary people should set sooner than they usually do.
saying no.
Boy, that could be five different shows. Okay.
Uh,
Burnout shows up more often in the mind or the body.
I think in the body, usually I think, at least for me, I typically will notice it in my body. Like I'll notice, stress in my lower back, or like, things like that from being tense, or so a lot of times for me it's physical first.
Mhm. Number nine, one daily small habit that can actually help prevent burnout?
I call it a by myself meeting. So so basically what that is like in the, at some point for me it's in the morning, but I make some coffee, I sit down right here, at my desk, and I basically just very quickly look through my schedule for the day and kind of, and that helps to relieve some burnout because then I'm not like I know what to expect. I have everything kind of um I'm ready for the day. I'm prepared. And then if something happens, which, a lot of days something will happen where it's like, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans, whatever. It's like something happens. And because I was kind of prepared, it's, oh yeah, okay, well, I can maneuver around that this way. Or but I think basically, I guess the answer to that is centering ourselves on a daily basis in right now. So some of that is mindfulness techniques, but for me, it's really just taking 5 or 10 minutes to focus on what my day looks like and what I'm going to need to do.
Okay, and the 10th, the last one. Finish the sentence. Burnout is your mind's way of saying,
Stop, slow down. That's really stop and slow down.
yeah, stop and smell the roses. So let's talk about the long-term consequences of burnout and prevention. We'll wrap up the show with these. If burnout goes unaddressed, what are the long-term mental health risks that you worry about?
Well, obviously, depression, feeling depressed. It can exacerbate anxiety. It's just, being burned out. If there is another behavioral health condition, burnout will almost always make that worse, or exacerbate it in some way.
Because even isolation, for that matter, too. Someone's
Mhm.
completely burned out, they're going to stop going out with friends
Yeah.
because they're just exhausted and
Yeah,
stuff.
and it's a
So,
balance, where like isolation's not always a bad thing,
mhm,
but it is when that's the regular,
right.
like that's
I think a lot of people will lose control over, they don't realize the domino effect
yeah.
from burnout. So, what are some practical ways people can recognize burnout early and intervene before it turns into anxiety, depression?
One thing I think is, talk to the people that you're close to, like talk with them about how you're feeling, what's going on. A lot of times, even if it's something I am, like afraid to admit because, oh no, they'll think I'm not good enough. They'll think I need help. All those same things that all of us think a lot of times. It's just good to get the perspective of someone who I trust, who can say, hey, you know what? Like, I understand you feeling that way. Or, have you looked at it in this way? Just that having other perspectives can be a huge game changer for me.
And even, if you're overwhelmed at work, you
Hmm.
can talk to your employer, to your boss, and say, doing this, but man, I got to tell you, your head's burning the
Yeah.
heck out of me. I'm going home feeling completely burnt out because you never know, they may have a solution
Yeah.
that will lighten that look. Well, you know what? Maybe, I got Steve over there. He's not doing anything, really, I can make him do some of that, and this way we take
Yeah.
some of that stress off of you. There's no sin behind that. So our last question, boom, for someone
Mhm.
listening right now who feels drained but doesn't think they're bad enough to need help, what would you want them to hear?
Don't wait for it to get worse. Like there's never a better time to address something than now. So don't wait until it's a full-blown depression, or until you're struggling to get out of bed, or till you're feeling physically sick. Address that. Make sure that you're um I think the best thing anybody can do right now today in preventing burnout is make sure that you are doing something that you know uh, basically makes you happy at least once a day.
Yeah, find something, and it could be something simple as just sitting down quietly and watching your favorite TV show,
Yeah.
or just spending time with one of your pets,
Hmm.
and just taking 10 minutes to play with your dog, or so, or your cat, anything,
Yeah.
even your bird. If you have a bird, sit and talk to the bird. You'd be surprised. Sometimes that helps. So if there's one thing we want you to take away from today's conversation, it's this. Burnout is not personal failure. It's a signal. It's that signal that something in your life needs care, balance, or support. See, you can be highly functional and still struggling. You can love your job and still be exhausted. You can look okay on the outside, but quietly running on empty on the inside. And remember, burnout doesn't usually arrive all at once, doesn't come knocking on your door. Okay, it builds quietly in long days, blurred boundaries, emotional fatigue, and belief that pushing through is the only option. Now, today's conversation was about naming that experience before it becomes a breaking point.
And if you're listening and thinking, this sounds like me, please hear this. You don't have to wait till everything falls apart to ask for help. Support is available and small steps can make a huge difference. If you're feeling overwhelmed or in crisis, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call or text 988 for confidential support at any time.
Now, Dr. Davis, thank you for sharing your insight, helping us understand what burnout is and isn't, because it isn't about weakness. It's about being human in a demanding world.
Absolutely. Remember to visit our website at yourlifematterspodcast.com for more information on our podcast, as well as a way to contact us, buy some official merchandise, and even be a guest on our show.
Now, actually, a great way to let us know how you feel is to like, subscribe, and even leave a comment. Okay, not only will we respond to you, but also help our show get out to more and more people. See, many of you watching are not subscribing. Okay, please do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. And remember to share the episode with others who you feel might be benefit from hearing what you have to say. You might be working with a coworker and you see the signs of that burnout that they can't. Just share the episode with them.
Absolutely.
Okay, because maybe they'll see themselves in it. That's why we do the show. That hopefully, someone might see themselves in it and start to turn their life around before it gets worse. So again, to everybody out there, thank you for spending time with us. Take care of yourself, and please never ever forget, your life matters.
Life matters.
God bless you, and we hope to see you again next week for another exciting episode.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for joining us for this week's new episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. Please be sure to join us again next Thursday for another great episode with your hosts, Steve Hodgson and psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis. Please remember to subscribe to our channel if you have not already done so, and hit the like button and leave a comment. Your help with this helps us reach a wider audience that may need our help.